What if the very thing that makes you deeply loving is also the reason you keep getting emotionally drained without even realizing it? Because for an empath, it never starts as pain. It starts as care, understanding, patience, and the belief that love can fix anything. But slowly, something begins to shift inside them in a way they don't notice at first. And by the time they do, they're already too deep in a pattern that changes everything. Welcome back to Decoder's Mind. In today's video, we're going to explore the hidden emotional journey of an empath. How deep feeling, overgiving, and emotional awareness slowly turn into self-realization, boundaries, and inner strength. This is about understanding what really happens when empathy meets emotional imbalance, and how that changes the way a person loves, reacts, and eventually chooses themselves. In the beginning, an empath doesn't fully understand what's happening inside them. The discomfort they feel gets brushed off as something temporary, something situational, or even something they believe they should fix on their own. Their natural response isn't to step back, it's to move closer, to try harder, to give more of themselves. They convince themselves that if they just say the right thing, choose the right tone, or stay patient a little longer, everything will return to balance. That's who they are at their core. They try to bring calm to emotional chaos. But what happens when that chaos never settles? What happens when the same emotional wounds keep showing up again and again in patterns? This is where something begins to shift, not in a loud or obvious way, but quietly, deep inside. Every time an empath ignores their own discomfort just to keep the connection alive, they take a small piece from their own emotional reserves. At first, it feels manageable. They tell themselves this is what love looks like, that the other person just needs more understanding. So they stay open even when it hurts. But the human mind and body aren't built to handle constant emotional contradiction. You can't keep feeling pain while calling it connection without it catching up to you. Slowly, the empath starts to notice something doesn't align. What they are giving is not being returned. This awareness doesn't hit all at once. It builds quietly, like pressure growing behind a closed door, and eventually something changes. The empath doesn't announce it. There's no dramatic moment. They just begin to pull back. Conversations become shorter, their emotional presence becomes limited. The same person who once stayed up all night trying to understand you now takes longer to reply, or sometimes doesn't reply at all. From the outside, it might look like they've lost interest or become distant, maybe even cold. But that's not what's happening. It's protection. They haven't stopped caring. They've just reached a point where caring without being met halfway has drained them for too long. At the same time, something shifts in how they think. They start looking back at past moments through a new perspective. Situations they once excused or downplayed begin to reveal their true meaning. Patterns become clear, impossible to ignore. And with that clarity comes a quiet form of detachment. Not because they feel less, but because they finally see more. And once they see it, they can't unsee it. So they step back, not to hurt anyone, not to play games, but because they need to protect themselves. Because there comes a point where staying open in a cycle of repeated pain is no longer compassion. It becomes self-neglect. And that's where everything starts to change. Because now, instead of asking how to fix things, they begin asking why they ever accepted it in the first place. What follows isn't just distance, it's something deeper. It's a complete shift in how they see themselves. An empath doesn't pull away without questioning what led them there. They begin to reflect on the very thing that once defined them, their compassion. At first, this creates inner conflict. They've always believed their ability to understand, forgive, and give endlessly was their strength. And it is, but only when it's valued and respected. When that same openness is met with inconsistency, disregard, or emotional harm, they're forced to face a difficult truth. Empathy without limits isn't kindness. It's exposure without protection. So the change begins, slowly, almost unnoticed. They start saying no in small ways. They pause before giving their time or emotional energy so freely. They observe more and react less. And this is where people around them start to feel confused. The empath who was once always there, always understanding, always predictable, is no longer the same. But this isn't a loss of who they are. It's growth. It's refinement. They're learning something that doesn't come naturally to them, being selective. Not everyone gets access to their inner world anymore. Not every problem becomes theirs to solve. They begin to understand that constant giving without respect or return doesn't build connection. It creates imbalance. There's also a deeper shift happening within their mind. After repeated emotional strain, the brain starts focusing on self-protection. It begins to notice patterns more clearly, picking up on inconsistencies and potential harm. What once felt like giving someone the benefit of the doubt now feels like ignoring clear signs. And once that awareness turns on, it's hard to go back to being unaware. This is where the empath becomes more disciplined, not colder, just more intentional. They start to see that boundaries aren't walls that block love. They are what make healthy connection possible. Without them, empathy turns into self-sacrifice. With them, it becomes something strong and controlled. This is also the point where others begin to react differently. Some people will respect this change, while others will push against it, especially those who benefited from the empath having no limits. The moment those boundaries appear, the dynamic shifts. And those reactions reveal everything. They show who truly valued the empath and who simply depended on their endless giving. So the empath adjusts again. They stop over-explaining. They no longer feel the need to justify their space or their choices. They begin to trust that protecting their energy doesn't require approval from anyone else. This transformation isn't easy. It asks them to release an old version of themselves, the one that believed being needed meant being valued. In its place, they build something stronger, a sense of self-respect guided by awareness. Because true compassion isn't about giving endlessly, it's about giving with intention. And when an empath finally learns to guard their energy with the same intensity they once gave it away, everything changes. They stop being available to everyone and start choosing where their energy truly belongs. As this shift continues to deepen, the empath finds themselves in a space that's far more complex than simply pulling away or setting boundaries. It becomes a new way of living, thinking, and connecting. One where they are no longer losing themselves just to keep others close. As this shift continues, the empath moves into a place of deep inner tension. Something most people will never notice from the outside, but inside, it feels intense and constant. Even while they're starting to see things clearly and protect their energy, there's still a part of them that wants to love the way they always did. That part doesn't just disappear. It holds on to the memories, the good moments, the version of the connection that once felt real and meaningful. And this creates a quiet battle within them. On one side, there's emotional attachment built on history, feelings, and everything they once believed in. On the other side, there's something new forming: awareness, truth, and self-respect. These two forces don't blend easily. They pull in opposite directions. So the empath begins asking questions that don't have simple answers. Am I walking away too soon? What if they really do change? What if I'm reading this wrong? These thoughts don't come from weakness. They come from a mind trying to make sense of a deep emotional investment while also facing new reality. Because leaving someone you care about isn't just a decision you think through. It feels like something breaking inside. At the same time, another voice starts to rise. It's quieter, but steadier. It doesn't come from longing, it comes from observation. It says, stop focusing on what they say or what they could be. Look at what they consistently do. This is where everything begins to shift in a real way. The empath slowly moves from emotional reasoning to recognizing patterns. And that change matters. Because once they start judging the situation based on consistent behavior instead of hope, their inner balance begins to move. The feelings are still there, but now they're being questioned. And self-respect starts stepping in with a new standard. It brings different questions. Not, how do I make this work? But what is this costing me? Not, why are they like this? But why have I allowed this? These questions are uncomfortable because they turn the focus inward, not to blame themselves, but to take responsibility. And this is where the conflict reaches its highest point. The empath realizes that staying in the same pattern is no longer something happening to them, it's something they're choosing. And once that awareness appears, the feeling of being stuck disappears. It's replaced by responsibility. And responsibility is heavy because it demands action. So they hesitate. They take a step forward, then pull back. They distance themselves, then reconnect. From the outside, it can look confusing or inconsistent, but inside, it's a process. It's the space between who they used to be and who they are becoming. They are slowly breaking down an identity built on overgiving and replacing it with one rooted in balance and self-worth. Over time, the tension begins to settle. Not because they stop caring, but because they finally start valuing themselves as much as they've always valued others. And when that alignment happens, the decision becomes clear. It may not feel easy, but it feels certain. Because once self-respect is fully in place, it doesn't ask permission from emotional attachment anymore. It sets the standard. And at that point, the empath stops questioning whether they should stay or leave. They simply refuse to stay where they are constantly diminished. After all of this, after the distance, the reflection, and the internal struggle, there's one final stage that people often misunderstand. From the outside, it can look like the empath has become distant, cold, or completely unaffected. But that's not what's really happening. This isn't indifference. It's emotional exhaustion reaching its limit. There's only so long someone can feel everything, carry everything, and hold the emotional weight of both themselves and others before something inside begins to shut down. Not as a failure, but as protection. At this stage, the empath no longer reacts the way they used to. The same actions that once hurt deeply barely seem to touch them now. The need to fix things disappears. The urge to chase answers, to repair the bond, to bring everything back into harmony, it's gone. And this can feel strange, even to them. They start to wonder why they don't feel the same anymore, why it doesn't affect them like before. The reason is simple. After being under emotional pressure for too long, the nervous system adapts. It lowers sensitivity to keep things stable. This is what emotional numbness is. It's not the loss of depth. It's a temporary pause in feeling. And it's important to understand this clearly. Numbness is not healing. It's a break. It's the mind creating distance from overwhelming emotions so it doesn't get completely overwhelmed. But inside that pause, something powerful happens: clarity. Without the intensity of emotions clouding everything, the empath can finally see things as they are. There's no emotional flood distorting their view. There's space. And in that space, the truth becomes undeniable. They start to see how much they accepted, how much they overlooked, how often they ignored their own instincts just to keep the connection alive. And this realization comes quietly, without the emotional storm that used to come with it. It feels calm, but certain. This is where detachment becomes firm. Because now they're no longer being pulled by emotional highs and lows. They're grounded, neutral, and that neutrality is powerful. It breaks the cycle. There's nothing left to fix, nothing left to prove, nothing left to chase. And for the first time, the absence of chaos doesn't feel empty. It feels peaceful. This is usually when others notice the biggest change. The empath who once explained everything, reacted deeply, and stayed engaged is no longer showing up the same way. And that silence can be mistaken for not caring anymore. But the truth is, it's what happens when someone has cared deeply for too long without the right conditions for that care to survive. The real risk here is staying in that numb state for too long, because while it protects, it can also disconnect. And the goal for the empath isn't to feel nothing, it's to feel deeply but safely. So the next step is learning how to reconnect with emotions in a healthier way, to allow depth but with boundaries, to care but without losing themselves, to feel but with awareness. Because the strongest version of an empath isn't the one who gives endlessly, and it's not the one who shuts down completely. It's the one who learns how to feel without abandoning themselves. And if there's one thing to hold on to, it's this. When your ability to feel starts fading, don't ignore it, but don't be afraid of it either. It might be the moment your mind finally chooses peace over chaos and shows you that you were never meant to keep losing yourself just to hold on to something that keeps hurting you. In the end, the empath's journey is not about becoming cold or disconnected. It's about awakening. They move from overgiving without limits to understanding their own value, from emotional exhaustion to emotional awareness. What once felt like confusion slowly turns into clarity, and what once felt like attachment turns into discernment. They learn that love without boundaries leads to self-loss, and that real strength is not in enduring everything, but in recognizing what no longer deserves their energy. Even if the process brings distance, silence, or numbness, it is never the end of their ability to feel deeply. It is the beginning of learning how to feel without self-destruction. And once that understanding settles in, the empath no longer asks, "How do I fix this?" They simply choose peace, balance, and self-respect over emotional chaos. If this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss what's coming next on Decode His Mind. And in the comments, drop the word clarity if this made you see things in a new way. I'd love to know your thoughts and connect with you there.